So creepy.
You have to kind of, you have to do it like you have to bring it from the back of your throat. Hey, do it with me. That's not bad. That's not bad.
That was uncomfortable.
Because we will have gone quite mad, quite mad. You know.
Cinematic Frank-tastic.
Atu, Barada, Nikto.
I'll show you who I am and what I am.
By a werewolf and lives, becomes a werewolf himself.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to the Cinematic Frank-tastic podcast. I'm your host, Jason Weatherford.
And your other host, William Weatherford.
Get ready for opinions, dad jokes,
and bad jokes
as we watch and review sci-fi and fantasy films from the classics of yesteryear to the new favorites of today. Hey everybody, welcome again to the 8th episode of Cinematic Frank-tastic.
Goodness, it's been so many episodes.
We're going to definitely feel that there's a lot of episodes under our belt once we get done with episode 20.
My goodness.
It's going to feel like a lifetime. We're definitely going to have to take a break after that. So tonight we are talking about a very, very famous monster, a very famous story, and that is 1931's Frankenstein.
The dynamic duo of Frankenstein and Dracula inventing the Gothic genre.
Inventing the Gothic Hollywood genre, because these movies and books had been around for quite a while.
Although the latter is the one that does it most, which is the one we're talking about today. That's the one that introduced it. And, science fiction in general, in fact, I'm pretty sure, basically stemmed from this novel, Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus.
Right. Wasn't it 1800s when it was written?
Yep.
And the thing about it is it's considered a Gothic horror novel, but it's also considered a science fiction novel because of some of the themes and things like that within it, which we're going to talk about later, of course.
When this dead hand moves, the monster created by a man they called Mad is turned loose to strike terror into the hearts of men, to shock women into uncontrolled hysteria, to prey upon the innocence of children. This is the story you've heard about, talked about, the spine-tingling, blood-chilling story that stuns your emotions, Frankenstein.
So this is about the 1931 horror film from Universal Pictures. It was directed by James Whale. It was loosely, and I say loosely, based on the novel the same
I
name.
know. There's literally, if you're expecting that it'll be exactly like the book, they literally take out everything. The book is entirely different. The movies go on an entirely different tangent, and it's just an entirely different entity. So,
absolutely.
Like, entirely.
The same with Dracula, though. Didn't they change a lot?
They changed a lot, but they've still kept some things. Particularly Nosferatu, I'd think. Though I haven't read the novel personally myself. However, this novel I have personally read myself.
What I can tell you is both of these movies have something in common. They're both based upon the stage play. This one, the stage play was adapted by Peggy Webling. The Webling play was adapted by John Balderston. It was directed by James Whale, but it was... in the very beginning, it was Robert Florey and John Russell. They had come up with some elements of what they thought they wanted the movie to be, and it did not turn out well, and that's when James Whale came in and took over. The makeup artist for this movie is Jack Pierce, and he is amazing. We're going to see his work in the Frankenstein films. We're going to see him in The Wolfman. His work is amazing, so you'll see.
But first, a story that is personal to me, obviously. But there was a time when I was like 12 or like 11. I don't know, like 12 or 13, probably, like around that ballpark. I think it was like one of those lazy summers, and I wanted to read books that were good because I was bored, kind of, maybe. And so Frankenstein was one of the books I read after Moby Dick. And funnily enough, these all start with H. Is a hatchet, holes, and I think it was one called Hoot. I think.
Yeah.
That one I didn't really like that much, but Hatchet was extremely great, And Holes is also very popular. And Frankenstein was the one I read after Moby Dick, both of which are very great. However, I don't remember them because it was a while ago. But I personally read the Frankenstein book, and I thought it was great.
Sometimes you have to revisit these worlds, revisit these stories, get them fresh in your head.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Bible. You read the Bible, but then there's so much in the Bible that you just reread it again because you forgot what was in Exodus by the time you reached Jude or something.
So let's talk about the production first off, and then we'll go into the cast. Deal?
Obviously.
Well, first thing, we're going to see an old friend of ours, Mr. Edward Van Sloan. He has that very specific voice, especially when he rolls his R's. He's very specific in the way he talks. So he comes out from behind a curtain and he gives a friendly warning.
However, that is part of the plot, and we're not talking about that.
Oh, okay. We will skip that for now.
Oopsies.
That's okay. You will notice that that's very similar to almost a bookend to what he did at the end of Dracula that wasn't in the final film, where he warns everyone that the vampires are real. So he gives a warning that vampires are real, and then he gives a warning that this movie has scary stuff in it.
And they were working on it at about the same time, so I mean, that would be pretty realistic to be like, oh, well, we'll just do the same thing.
Yeah.
Thing is, they're both great movies because of his presence, I guess, is immaculate.
And of course, this is our first film that we see Boris Karloff.
The legendary man.
In the opening credits, though, Boris Karloff is unbilled as the creature or the monster. The big mistake people make is they call the creature Frankenstein. Is Frankenstein's monster or the creature or
the creation, the monster?
Right.
I call him the oaf a couple times, but he is kind of a sweet little oaf person.
Yeah, but his name has become synonymous with the word Frankenstein, and I think mainly whenever you get to the movie that we're going to get to.
Maybe that's because Frankenstein himself, Victor Frankenstein, seems like a monster because of his actions and stuff more than the monster is, as we will discuss later.
That is interesting. Are you going to go into that into detail later?
Yep.
All right, so basically they put a question mark instead of Boris Karloff's name. And I think they wanted to keep it a mystery.
Another thing is that instead of calling the author of this great novel, who's Mary Shelley, they say Mrs. Percy Shelley.
Percy B. Shelley, yeah.
Mrs. Percy B. Shelley. And I would honestly have put Mary Shelley because after all, that's her name, but
I don't know why they credited it like that. I don't know if it has something to do with an old style thing they used to do.
Or just basic sexism.
Oh, basic sexism for the win. Yay. All right. The question mark deal was a nod to the stage adaptation where the monster was billed only as question mark.
And it also doesn't reveal who the monster is so that people don't recognize Boris Karloff and then go, oh, it's just Boris Karloff. He's just a normal dude. Instead, they're making it more spooky and stuff.
He did some movies before this, though, William. So if they had revealed his name, I think it would have taken away some of the shock at seeing him in Jack Pierce's makeup.
This was also done a little bit in Lost World, as you saw, which they said to not reveal the movie to anyone else so that everyone would come to it with cleanness. I can't directly quote it, but...
Right. They also do the same thing with Phantom of the Opera, with Lon Chaney's makeup. They would put a sheet over his head when they were having him travel from set to set. So they did something similar. This is before the age of the internet, when you had leaks and all kind of different things. When somebody tries to keep a secret that Doctor Strange is in the new Spider-Man movie, you can't do that because they're filming outside. People have cameras and they just put this stuff online. Back in the day, it was kind of easier to keep those secrets to an extent. That's why the shock when people see these characters and then they have these visceral reactions, you can almost believe that they did faint.
Yeah, that is very fascinating. There are many leaks nowadays, which is like, I'm just like kind of sad. And then they posted in like YouTube on the titles, and then the recommended feed shows them to you, and then you're like, avert your eyes.
You're trying to avoid spoilers on YouTube? You can't do that.
New Daredevil movie spoilers.
No, stop. You almost have to just stay off the internet, period, because of the spoilers.
I'm doing that now for Sonic 2, by the way.
I hope they don't spoil any of that. I'm going to try to be careful.
Apparently, they spoiled it with McDonald's. There was a McDonald's controversy.
Oh, toys. Yeah, they have ruined stuff before. Toys have ruined things as well. There's been some people who have gone to toy fairs in other countries and snapped photos of those and put those online, which going to give clues to what's going to happen in the movie. So
very topical. Very topical.
Yeah, it is. So in the end credits, it does list Boris Karloff when it says a good cast is worth repeating. A lot of movies do that. They'll give the cast list at the beginning, they'll cast list at the end, scrolling credits. So they kind of started doing that.
And they especially do that now. I mean, we have like intro credits and outro credits. Outro credits are commonly kept and stuff. And then later on, they put like post-credit movie clips in there as well, which we won't get for a while. But this was the next best thing, or not the next best thing. This made the post-credits thing happen.
Yeah, the other thing too is they kept it a mystery for another reason, because early on in the process, they were actually wanting to use Bela Lugosi. And the strange thing is, there's actually a poster where it's called the Electric Beam Eyes poster, which credits Lugosi as the monster, and it's got him shooting lasers over a village or a city or something.
However, that was a very early poster, and it eventually was Boris Karloff.
Yeah, absolutely. So another thing too is there were these shocking moments in the movie. Some people had thought that they did the question mark at the beginning so that when people saw the monster or creature do these horrible things, that they didn't connect it with the actor and say, well, the actor is a horrible person because he did these things. He was the creature. So they kind of separated the actor from the thing he was playing. Whenever they were going to have Bela Lugosi be the creature, this was when the guy named Robert Florey, was connected with it. And the story was very different. I think James Whale is the one that really can be credited with moving it in the direction it did. Now, when they did Lugosi, the monster or creature in the story was just mindless, murdering thing. There was no emotion. There was no pathos. There was no glimmer of humanity. There's a rumor that Lugosi had said, I'm famous in my home country, and here I am playing a scarecrow. Basically just put your arms up and move forward and murder things. But that's, you and I have both seen the movie.
Whale, I guess he had a bad time.
Oh.
Speaking of whales,
right.
You talk about the director who is James Whales. What kind of guy is he?
Okay, so James Whale was an English film director. He directed also theater. He also was an actor as well, so he kind of understood a lot of what it took to make these films. He spent a lot of his career in Hollywood. Some of his most remembered works, of course, would be Frankenstein, The Old Dark House, The Invisible Man, which we'll see, The Bride of Frankenstein as well. We have to wait till 1935. That's like 4 years after Frankenstein came out to see Bride. And Bride starts right up where the original Frankenstein ends. So I almost think of them as a two-part. So by 1941, his film directing career was over. He continued to direct, for the stage, doing plays and things like that. He also loved to paint and travel. But the investments he made early on made him rich. So he lived a pretty comfortable life until 1956, where he suffered some strokes. And that robbed him of the energy that he had always had. And he was in constant pain.
Imagine getting robbed of your energy. I mean, we're totally not robbed of energy right now. We're not sleep deprived.
No, of course not. But here's the thing, William. He committed suicide in 1957. He drowned himself in his swimming pool. I know we're not a crime podcast where we talk about sad things that happen to actors and directors, but it did.
Next, we have the presenter, as it always says, presented by, is Carl Laemmle Jr. Is there anything we could say about him compared to the senior?
Carl Laemmle Jr., one main thing I know about him is that he was known for spending a lot of money. I don't think he was spending money on a lot of these productions, but he spent money outside of it, and so they were like, well, we've got to get him under control.
He was efficient in his buying.
Right. But the other guy is Irving Thalberg. Irving Thalberg, I think is his name. worked for Universal, and he was very good at managing money, managing these productions. He actually was involved with Phantom of the Opera and some other of these pictures. So I think he kept a lot of that in check from what I could see. Now, the thing that I talked about earlier was Bela Lugosi. Well, the makeup test that they did for him when he did Frankenstein, when doing a tryout, is it looked a little too familiar to us. It looked like Paul Wegener in The Golem.
Which is a very good comparison. Der Golem and Frankenstein is a very great comparison. We could talk about that.
The thing about Lugosi, he would actually play Frankenstein in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman about 10 years later. But that one's when his career was kind of going down. And one main reason why he was pulled in was Lon Chaney Jr., who is Lon Chaney Sr.'s son. Of course, we'll see a lot of him. First time we'll see him, you and me, is in the movie The Wolfman. So this is his character, the Wolfman, and they were, at first, and I didn't know this, they were planning on having Lon Chaney Jr. play the Wolfman and Frankenstein fighting each other in like a split screen.
Oh yeah, kind of like Dracula, that Lon Chaney was going to play Dracula and Van Helsing. So they're just like, we can do that. We could always do that. We'll try that again and again and again and again. It won't work.
Yeah, it won't. The problem that he had with it is it was too much work for the same pay. So he gets paid once for 2 parts, and that's not right.
Because after all, it wouldn't cost that much more to pay it for 2 actors than having 2 actors and paying them, because, well, that's literally the same thing. If you double
plus
the
you can
price
have
for
them
one
touch
person.
and wrestle and grab each other, while they're fighting. That's perfect. All right, so Lon Chaney Jr. actually was the monster in Ghost of Frankenstein, which is a sequel to this movie.
We'll talk about that later. So, Colin Clive, he played Victor Frankenstein. Oh no, I'm sorry. Victor is played by John Bowles. What are you saying, William? Well, I'm saying that they switched the names of Henry and Victor around.
There was a character in the book named Henry Clerval. Do you think that's where they got that from?
Yeah, and then they switched it so it's Henry Frankenstein and Victor, I don't know.
Victor Moritz.
But they switched it around, and that's really hilarious.
All right, the first guy we'll talk about is Colin Clive. He was a British stage and screen actor. His most memorable role was as Henry Frankenstein, the creator of the monster in 1931's Frankenstein and the 1935 sequel, Bride of Frankenstein. He doesn't show up in any of the other films, so you can probably guess what happens to him at the end of Bride of Frankenstein. Not to be a spoiler or anything.
His portrayal of Henry Frankenstein I thought it was pretty great, I guess, but he could have had a bit more personality, maybe. I mean, they could have thrown in a lot more personality to him, made him a bit more interesting. However, it wouldn't really be that necessary. I guess he played a pretty great role for his titular role. Well,
he got really excited when the monster was getting created, and then after that, he's just kind of like, now what? And he wants to keep everything secret from his wife, his fiancé.
Yeah, after which he's very generic, but otherwise, he plays that scene very well.
But he's very driven, and he brings a lot to it. He brings a lot more than, remember in Dracula, when we had Jonathan Harker, the guy who played him, and I said he was he played it very plainly. I do not think Colin Clive played his role plainly. You can look at him and you can really see emotion coming out, and you can really see him, really dedicated to what he wants to create, and also keeping it secret from everyone else in the world until he's finished with it. So I don't have any complaints about Colin Clive. I do think it's very memorable.
But it could have had more personality elsewhere than just that part, because he's just laid off. Kind of.
Right, of course, and we don't have to say a lot about Dwight Frye, because Dwight Frye played the character of Fritz.
But he does manic characters very well, and he also played this character to the wellest of his ability.
He had a nickname called the Man with the 1,000-Watt Stare, and of course we see that 1,000-watt stare a few times. He does that wide-eyed kind of reaction that he has.
Although they could have done a bit better with the hunchbacking, because it's like, sometimes he's just like upright, and I'm just like, you could probably not be as upright as you are and just keep the way that you are. or else it won't break our immersion. But that's not really something to be mad about. I'm just saying.
Right. The character Fritz was invented completely for this. When people say, "Oh, we got Dr. Frankenstein and his helper Igor," well, Igor doesn't come later, and Igor is actually played by Bela Lugosi later on in the series.
And he doesn't come until Son of Frankenstein, which we're going into in the 1940s. But now
Yes.
we're at the 1931, so we're a bit ways from that.
And he's hunchbacked as well, but he's hunchbacked because they hang him and it doesn't take. It breaks his back. But Fritz, I think, does have a deformity from birth or something like that. But a lot of times the character we think of as Igor was actually Fritz. When people say, "Oh, Igor is the hunchback guy who helped Dr. Frankenstein create the monster or bring him to life," that's Fritz, really. But if you watch the movie, you'll understand. And that character is not in the book whatsoever.
Yeah, he literally just did it alone. And he was like, well, maybe I'll try and do this. And he did it. It literally was no electricity, nothing. He just created it. It doesn't even tell us because, after all, if we knew the secret of life, we would turn into Frankenstein, and then the movie and the book, the book would just repeat itself over and over again.
Is that why we also don't know the secret spell that Rabbi Lowe did to bring the golem back to life?
Yeah, because you can't reveal the secret of life in movies and books. It's just a rule.
I think the book took a long time to create the creature, and it had it uses a little bit of science and a little bit of alchemy.
Yeah, but he literally just did it in some random area. He didn't use electricity. It wasn't spectacular. He just did it, and then it results in a monster. Cool, I guess.
Can we talk about the method real quick?
Sure.
The machinery that was used for that scene, the famous scene, it had a lot of real electricity effects. It was created by a man named Strickfaden, and eventually the term Strickfaden is actually referring to these machines. So anytime they have these weird labs with these
old-fashioned,
these Tesla coil looking things, absolutely, they called them Strickfadens. So, and actually, Mr. Strickfaden actually was a stunt double for Boris Karloff, who I'll talk about in a minute, in the Frankenstein scene, because Boris Karloff was just freaked out by all the sparks and things. He was afraid it would hit him and burn him or something. So I thought that was kind of funny. I did not know that.
Most people in the audience would have probably felt that as well, because it's like, this hadn't been done before, and so imagine their fright when they see electric machinery for the first time.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was expensive, though.
So modern. so Promethean.
Yeah. So Strickfaden actually, they rented it from him for about like $10,000, I heard. I could be wrong. So back to the cast. Now, I'm not going to talk about Boris Karloff yet. I'm going to tease that till the end of this. So, Mae Clarke
is Elizabeth.
Yeah, she played Elizabeth.
She's the standard woman character who gets married and does nothing else.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you look at her eyes and her pleading with Henry, I could really feel that. I don't know, I think I saw a little bit of a more down-to-earth kind of feel to her than I did with Mina in Dracula. I actually think she's better than, what was her name? Helen Chandler was in Dracula.
But this is like a decimal rating system, I guess. So it's like, well, we could argue over what specific spot in the rankings that everyone is, I guess. But we're all just men who don't want to do extensive mathematics for our meager brains.
Mae Clarke is her acting name or her performing name. Her real name is Violet Mary Klotz. Of course, people are like, that last name is not going to work. You're Mae Clarke now. All right, she was a dancer, an actress. She's most known for playing Elizabeth Frankenstein. But she's also known for a scene in James Cagney's The Public Enemy. There's a scene where he takes half a grapefruit and just smushes it in her face because he's mad at her. And that movie was also released in 1931. There's only one more thing I know about that scene. It's a very famous and parodied scene in The Public Enemy. And there was if the movie was so popular, it ran 24 hours a day at a theater in Times Square. So Mae Clarke's ex-husband, check this out, he had the grapefruit scene timed, and he would frequently buy a ticket, enter the theater to again enjoy that sequence, and then leave the theater immediately. So he paid just so he could like time it and walk right in.
And thing is, this is probably multiple theaters, so he had to do extensive math.
I don't think he went to every single theater. He just went to one. He went in there, saw somebody smush a grapefruit into his ex-wife's face, and then went, all right, I'm done, and then left. That's a really jerky thing. I mean, not liking somebody so much that you want to see a grapefruit smashed in their face. Just you're going to pay like nowadays it'd be like $5 to $6, $7, $8. That's like paying now just to go see a
like literally you could
have
have eaten that grapefruit. Give it to a poor person, but instead you smash it in someone's face.
Well, that was in the movie,
the Festival of Fools.
That was something James Cagney did to her in the movie. It was an acting thing. The ex-husband just wanted to see somebody do that to his ex-wife.
So we have John Bowles as Victor,
yeah,
quickly, and Marilyn Harris is Maria, and Michael Mark is Maria's father.
I don't have a lot to say about some of those other characters. I can say a couple things about John Bowles, but some of those other characters I don't know a lot about. But I do know they show up in a lot of these Universal monster movies. They recycled a lot of these actors. They'll bring them into other parts. You'll even see Dwight Frye. He'll pop up and have like one little line now and again. There's actually a part where there's one little line that he has in Frankenstein versus the Wolfman. He says one little thing, and you're like, oh, there's Dwight Frye. And you can just play the little Dwight Frye game and go, oh, there he is. So John Bowles was a leading kind of man in silent movies. And when they moved over to, quote, talkie movies, he did really good because his voice was excellent because he was a trained singer. So they pulled him in a lot of musical parts and things like that. He was the leading man. Toward the end of his life, he had invested in oil wells in Texas, I think. And so he was able to retire making some buku bucks. I mean, lots. Toward the end of his life, he had a good bit of money, actually.
And this movie eventually came up to like 12 million, I think, by 1950, I think.
Yeah, and quite a bit more than that if you count all the
and
videos.
And like $1 million at like the first year, and then like 12 million. So that's like big stonks.
And quite a bit more than that if you count all the amount that Universal was able to make off of DVD sales and things like
merchandise.
And VHS sales since that time. Okay, so
Lionel Belmore is the Burgermeister, and to that we say, welcome to Burger King. I'm the Burgermeister.
Right? Do you have that weird face, or is that? The Burger King, the one where you're like laying in bed, you turn over, there's the Burger King, and it just freaks you out.
No, he was like the mayor kind of guy.
But of course, we see him later in some other Universal movies, so if you do see him, let me know. So Boris Karloff, we're going to see quite a bit of him and Bela Lugosi going forward. We're going to probably see their whole careers as we watch these movies that we're watching for the podcast.
Because after all, this is evolving into a big chain, a big intellectual property kind of thing as we go through this saga. And the Dracula saga, and the Mummy saga after this episode.
Right, there are quite a few Mummy movies. There are like
and then
3 or 4.
I think there's also, what was the other one that we're going to go into as well? There was one more saga we were going to do.
Well, there's some other ones that have, you get the creature from the Black Lagoon, and he's got 2 other, 3 movies in total. So some of these lesser-known characters maybe have 2 or 3 movies, or even 1 or 2. But Frankenstein has got 3 or 4, or 5 or so. Okay, so Boris Karloff, that's not his real name. He's a British stage actor. His real name is William Henry Pratt.
Boris Karloff, that's a Slavic name, but you're not Russian, are you?
No, not really.
You were born in?
I was born in Dulwich, England.
When did you take the name Boris Karloff?
Well, when I first went on the stage, 1910, actually, up in Western Canada.
Why did you change your name, Boris?
Well, it was a family name on my mother's side. And I thought my own name of Pratt, if I ever got known in the theater, might be unfortunate.
What was your real name, the full name?
Pratt.
George?
William Henry
William Henry Pratt.
Do not confuse with Chris Pratt.
No, of course. This is William Henry Pratt.
And he came before. He is not descended to make Chris Pratt. And to star the Lego movie, Boris Karloff in the Lego movie.
Not all Pratts are related, as we know. Of course, he was famous for playing many different roles. We aren't quite sure where the name Boris Karloff came from. Some people have different theories that, there was a character in this movie.
Or that he
Boris...
changed his name to sound foreign in Russian and stuff.
Right, but there was this character named Boris Karloff, and they were like, oh, that's got to be it. But he was using the name before that movie even came out. Another thing that you can know about Boris Karloff, and I think we've watched this, he also played Imhotep in The Mummy, which we'll see. He played the Frankenstein's monster in Bride of Frankenstein and Son of Frankenstein. He also narrated the animated television special of Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and that was in 1966.
He puzzled and puzzled till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more.
He got a Grammy Award
Boris
for that.
Karloff?
Yes.
That the famous voice?
Yes, that's
where
him.
His heart grew 5 times the size. He said that.
I thought it was 3 times too small or 3 times whatever.
It was 3 times too small and then grew 5 times bigger.
Yeah, and the thing about Boris Karloff that you can pick out when he's speaking, he hadn't have any speaking roles yet. Once you start hearing him speaking, especially in The Mummy, you'll hear it.
Wow, I didn't know he sounds that like in the Grinch Who Stole Christmas. He's the famous voice.
Mr. Grinch. Like there's that voice. And the thing is, he has a lisp. He has a slight lisp. He talks like this. It's very interesting. And when you hear it, you can just go, oh, that's Karloff. In fact, when people do a Karloff impression, you have to put that lisp in to make it sound really good. Early in his career, he had a very interesting kind of face. And so he could play Arabs, people from Arabia, and he could also play people from India. He could play just about anything.
Oh, right. By the way, that does make sense now that I realize it. It came out in 1966, so he would sound old by then anyway. Boris Karloff.
Yeah, talking about Grinch?
Boris Karloff narrator voice.
Yes. And he also did the voice of the Grinch, actually. We don't know exactly where he got that name, and Karloff's daughter, Sarah, has publicly denied any knowledge that there were any people from Yugoslavia or the Slavic area of Eastern Europe that may have done this. So she doesn't know where he got that name. And the fact that he chose to be an actor, the family kind of didn't agree with that. His daughter Sarah says that they considered him when he was younger the black sheep of the family. Earlier on when he was acting, he didn't have a lot of success. He had some, but not a lot. He is no stranger to doing manual labor. He did dig ditches, shovel coal, cleared land.
Kind of like Der Golem. Getting the groceries and cutting the logs.
Oh my goodness. So you're saying that Boris Karloff understands the heart of what makes a golem because he knows what it's like to do manual labor?
Yeah, might as well call him Golem Karloff now.
Golem Karloff. Well, the thing is, I remember him for a lot of different roles. He played some, scary doctor kind of roles. He, of course, did The Mummy. He's very instantly recognizable. Even when he plays a good guy, which he's a nice guy. He's a really sweet man, He really takes his job seriously. All the actors that are with him are just, when he really digs into a role, he really gives it all he has. And when you watch him in Frankenstein, you can see that he understands what it is to communicate without even saying a word. He doesn't really talk a lot in Frankenstein. Although, when we get to Bride of Frankenstein, he does do a little bit more than just grunting and kind of moaning and making noise. He does actually say some words, which is the closest we're going to get to that, unfortunately, in this series.
Yeah, and he says pyrotechnics terrible.
Oh, you mean fire bad?
Yes, except he was smart, but actually he wasn't smart. So anything more about Boris Karloff before we go into the break?
He was in 80 movies before he got into Frankenstein in 1931.
Goodness.
Yeah, and it was a very hard role to do. The costume was actually, with the shoes, about 11 pounds, each of the shoes. And Universal Studios very quickly copyrighted the entire Frankenstein getup. So if anybody ever wants to use that kind of style again, they've got to pay Universal.
So you just snatch, and you're just like, you can't dress up in Halloween ever again. Universal demands it. The minions will come after you.
The minions will come after you. Well, the other thing is there are other movies that do have Frankenstein in them. There is a movie called Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and it's very much like the book, but it's very gory, and some of the makeup is very interesting looking. He actually, the creature actually looks like he's sewn together from the bodies of different corpses, like he was in the book, and like he's supposed to be in the movie. And he actually does learn English, just like he does in the book. So, and some of the scenes that are in the book we'll actually see in Bride of Frankenstein when we get there. I'm going to see if you can notice which ones we're taking wholesale from the actual book. This was a very influential movie.
Yeah.
And it's one of the best movies of all time. I mean, everybody votes it as even more influential even than Dracula. And honestly, I think the imagery in this is so much better because you see a lot more. In Dracula, you may see 3 sets total. In Frankenstein, you've got the countryside, you've got the amazing lab in the castle.
Mary Shelley did a great job. I mean, you go, girl. You created a great book, caused a great movie. If anyone was like, I don't know what to dress up on Halloween as, I seriously don't know. There's literally, what, a ferret, and I don't know what on earth this is from, but or a mummy, because that came after. So it's like now she gave us what to wear on Halloween because Frankenstein did such a good job and she did such a good job.
Oh yeah, as a shout out to Mary Shelley, she actually came up with this after a nightmare. She had a nightmare, and that's how she came up with the idea for this. There supposedly was a situation where it was a rainstorm. It was very heavy. They were all, her and another couple of authors, along with her husband, were trapped in this house, kind of nice mansion. They weren't really trapped. It was awesome. But they had a kind of a contest. They were like, I'll tell my story. I'll see if I, scare the pants off you. And then the other guy goes, okay, fine. Tell
and
your
she
story.
wins casually.
Yeah, she did. In fact, they recreate that whole little scene at the beginning of Bride of Frankenstein. They show Mary Shelley talking to the other author, and they're saying,
Yeah, of which is the better movie, because Frankenstein, the first movie, is kind of a shell, and the yolk is what Bride of Frankenstein is, because it kind of finishes off that other cap, so it's
I think of them as
cap.
2 parts of the same whole. So when I look at it, I do think Bride of Frankenstein is better made all told. Altogether.
But it is fascinating why they weren't just like, well, I guess we're gonna have to split it into 2 parts. I mean, we could do Lord of the Rings, but in the extreme past, extended edition,
right,
merged
exactly.
together. But no.
Well, these movies, they bookend each other. One goes directly into the other one. I mean, we're not going to do them, one after the other, but we're going to do a couple more movies in between. But when we get to Bride of Frankenstein, you'll understand how
it's kind of like we
fit.
have a 3-pronged shot, or not like 3-pronged, like a multi-shot, just like, and then you have to load up the next ones and then just like chew through all those grapes, the grapes of wrath.
Sometimes I don't know what you're talking about, your references.
I don't even know either.
You don't even know. Oh my goodness. We're going to end this whole podcast up by grunting. We're going to
That was uncomfortable.
Because we will have gone quite mad. Quite mad. But yeah, let's talk about the plot. I definitely want to hear what you think about these different points. And when we get to certain parts in the plot, I'm definitely going to kind of point out when we get to a scene that was cut or censored out. For what reasons. That's something that I definitely remember.
But was thankfully restored. So
yeah, absolutely.
We'll go into a break.
Welcome back, listeners. You heard us talk about the production, the cast, the making of, the makeup tests, the possible choices of who was going to play Frankenstein. Sorry, Frankenstein's monster, and then who was chosen. Now we're going to talk about the plot. We're going to talk about what happened in the movie. We're going to talk about we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive, right, William? Are you a little bit on that? We'll probably do commentary as we go. If there's certain things we want to talk about. as we go, I'll kind of just probably slow you down just because there's some things that I wanted to say about certain scenes. So when we get to those, you've
got a game plan.
Yeah,
so
you have been brought to life with your criminal brain. So just set to destroying the town.
All right. So first of all, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein has the subtitle of "Or the Modern Prometheus." So Prometheus, he was a Greek god, I'm pretty sure. And what he did is he brought fire to man, and he defied the gods in doing so. Or he was even thought to have created man out of clay in the first place, which would have applied here very well. But so Prometheus was punished in this act by being chained to a rock where an eagle, which was the symbol of Zeus, was repeatedly pecking out his liver all day long, every day, for the rest of his entire life. And apparently he got freed by Hercules, or Heracles, one time.
Heracles, right. Didn't he regenerate, like, every day? Like, his wounds would all clear up, and then they'd come and do it again?
Because after all, you can't peck out a liver you already pecked.
Right, and I think...
Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
Pickled livers. I think he was like a titan or something like that. I don't think he was a full-on god, but again,
This is very primeval.
Yeah, and often there's a lot of different legends in different religions where some being brings things down to mankind that they weren't meant to know and they weren't ready for.
Yeah, the knowledge.
Yeah.
And, like, the greatness was bestowed is some of the things. Also, like, this shows things such as, experiments, like, lead the tragedy when they go too far. So, like, science is terrible. And, the greatness of man, which is a disillusionment of society. And Frankenstein also loses his family, like everyone, kind of like a Job sort of thing. So that's another thing. And also with with Frankenstein's monster, I mean, there's a lot of, like the virtues of companionship, friendship, acceptance even. And injustice as well.
Are the virtues of friendship and things like it being made a part of things, and was that something that Frankenstein's monster, or the creature, I should probably call him?
Yeah, he really wanted, companionship.
He's missing those things, yeah.
But he's instead facing injustice. And overall, basically, you could sum it up as curiosity kills the cat, basically. If you're curious into the ways that God works, and you decide to become God, and then that kills the cat.
Yeah, definitely. As far as this is kind of the themes of the movie, I think we'll get into plot in just a moment. But one thematic thing I would think is when there's something that God does so well, or even nature, in some of the movies that we'll watch that don't really talk about God, they mention nature. Things that nature does so well, and over time, man decides that's not good enough. And they want to put their own spin on it. They want to do it themselves, and they want to do it, their own way.
Yeah, like man is the greatest is the disillusion.
Yeah, in most movies that we're going to see, you're going to see that come up time and again. There's going to be, things like in Godzilla, you have the man trying to harness the atom, and the horrible things that can happen from that. A lot of the movies of the 50s and 60s that we're going to come up on are, man, trying to understand and control the atomic structures and things like that, and thinking that it has some kind of, it has a two-edged sword. So, like, on one side, it's got these amazing things that it can do, and the other side is it's got a horror to it. Of course, when we get to a lot of the movies that came after the Hiroshima atom bomb, where a bomb was dropped on a Japanese city and it just destroyed everything.
Well, two cities.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Two cities,
exactly.
2 bombs.
And Nagasaki, right? So the horrors of that, nuclear energy is amazing, but you can take that very thing and harness it and use it for horror and terror. And even some of these things that are in science fiction, were birthed in the book Frankenstein. It came out in the 1800s. And right now, this movie was made, this was 1931, right? So
yeah, this is the topic of artificial intelligence and stuff, which would come to play in the future. 2009 Space Odyssey is a good one.
Oh, 2001.
2001.
Right. So, and it's funny, that was made in 1969, and so you got, 2001, and they were already looking ahead to artificial intelligence. See, these are a lot of these things we're gonna deal with in the later seasons of Cinematic Fantastic, God willing, that we can do this, still keep going on this amazing deep dive that we're doing with these films. These are subjects that are going to come up time and again. Even for some of the younger people that don't know any of these classic movies, I'm sure they know Jurassic Park. And when you get to see Jurassic Park, you'll understand what I mean. Man taking nature into his own hands. And there's a quote from Jurassic Park where Ian Malcolm, a chaotician, he says that the scientists stood on the shoulders of giants, and they asked themselves not, could we do it? When they should have asked, should we do this? And they were just doing it without thinking.
Because this has moral implications for the society and for the future of society.
For the dinosaurs, they picked these plants to put out on the island because they look nice. But one of the paleobotanists, she says, you picked them because they look nice, but some of them are poison to some of these animals. These are things that you couldn't possibly have known. You're thinking that you know everything, So, and this all, I know we're going off topic, but really the topic is it's embedded in the story of Frankenstein, and even in the 1931 movie, even though it's different than the book.
This is why this book and this movie is great. Well, not particularly this movie, because it's kind of like a whole saga intellectual property, but you get what I mean. It's like, that is why this is amazing and is a fulcrum for great literature.
Yeah, and also cool movies too, that can explore some of these deeper elements while still having a movie that still functions as kind of a thriller, scary movie as well. You can look at it and say there's deeper elements in there, but you can also look at it and go, that was pretty cool. So, and the thing you talked about a moment ago about companionship, who would you say? I would say that there's a scene with a little girl, and it's his first someone really treats him as not a monster but a real creature for like half a second, and then that doesn't turn out so well. The same thing with, there's another movie that comes after Bride of Frankenstein, which we'll see, and there's a couple moments that he tries to have a companion, and it just cannot go right. It's doomed.
But we'll discuss this a little later because we've got to get on to plot.
Oh, yeah. No, that's fine. Talk about it now or talk about it later. I think these are interesting things. But yeah, we can jump straight into the plot if you want to. Where do we begin?
We begin with Edward Van Sloan, and he is giving us a kind of, where Dracula didn't, out comes Frankenstein that did, kind of stealing kind of thing. So I will paraphrase it slightly, because I didn't write it entirely word for word, but he says, "How do you do? Lemley would feel it would be a little unkind to present this picture without just a word of friendly warning. We're about to unfold the story of Frankenstein, a man who sought to create man after his own image without reckoning upon God. It's one of the strangest tales ever told, and it deals with the two great mysteries of creation, life and death. I think it'll thrill you, it may shock you, it might horrify you. So if any of you feel that you don't care to subject your nerves to such strain, well, we warned you."
Well, we warned you?
And then that's where it begins. True jump scare where he just says, "How do you do?"
We've seen Edward Van Sloan before in the last episode. Who did he play?
He played Van Helsing, another
That's
Van.
correct. Who does he play in this movie, though?
Dr. Waldman.
Dr. Waldman.
Now we're on a trivia thing.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to see if you remembered. Yeah.
Yeah. What is a?
Yeah. He actually, I was preparing for the next movie that we're going to watch, which is The Mummy with Boris Karloff again. And I noticed that I think Edward Van Sloan is in that too. And he's playing similar characters. And I think they really like the way his voice is and how he seems to be very,
every Universal property, you've got Van Helsing, but since he was already old, he was dead by the time of Minions, sadly. So we couldn't have Van Sloan in Minions. That would be extremely cursed.
His voice is very recognizable, and he has a kind of an air about him that's kind of an intelligence and kind of a warning aspect to it.
Yes.
But anyway,
let's start the
continue
film.
on.
So the film starts with, it starts funnily enough with everyone is weeping over this dead man who's Canon Boris Karloff, and they're weeping over him, reading Latin and stuff. Very Catholic again. So they're like reading Latin over this dude. We don't know what it means, and there's church bells in the background and stuff. They bury the body.
Parts of him are Boris Karloff, maybe, and parts of him are the next guy.
Yeah.
There's like a guy that's hanging. I think we'll talk about that.
And then the guy who buried him then goes off with a pipe in his mouth, and he's exiting. And so Fritz and Henry come in, and they're sneaking in very quietly and very, they have a mission. And they dig it up right.
Grave robbers.
They dig it up right again, which reminds me of F.W. Murnau, if you recall, had a lot of grave diggers come to him. So maybe this was F.W. Murnau and Boris Karloff was the hangman.
Oh, that's horrible.
Canonized. It's official.
No. Let Murnau rest. He's created so many great movies. Let him rest.
And so then they dig up the hexagonal-shaped coffin. It's kind of like an extended hexagon.
He's just resting, waiting for a new life to come.
And so then they wheelbarrow it away, if that's a word. And then they grab the hang guys, as we said before. And the brains are useless. They're just dead. Brain dead. Ba-dum-ching.
Well, specifically, the hanged guy doesn't have a great brain. And it could be because of the way he was hanged and the blood loss or something damaged it. But yeah, they need a better quality brain, and
it's got to float in some pickle juice.
Oh, I think it's probably formaldehyde. But yeah, if you want to think of it as pickle juice, that's starting to make me hungry, and I don't think I want to connect that with brains.
So meanwhile, at the nearby college, we have Henry and his former teacher, Dr. Waldman, and he's teaching a class to all these college people, and they're laughing at this comedy relief average skeleton. Just a skeleton. He bobs up and down, and that's your comedy relief, guys. That's your comedy relief, guys. Yay. It just bobs up and down. And so then Dr. Waldman shows the brain of the average human being and the criminal brain.
And in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, here we have one of the most perfect specimens of the human brain that has ever come to my attention at the university. And here the abnormal brain of the typical criminal. Observe, ladies and gentlemen, the scarcity of convolutions on the frontal lobe as compared to that of the normal brain, and the distinct degeneration of the middle frontal lobe. All of these degenerate characteristics check amazingly with the case history of the dead man before.
Which, as we all know, that is not how it works in Frankenstein the book. Because one thing, he's actually smart in that one. Second of all, it's only because of his societal treatment and the injustices committed to him, just because of the way he looks, is the way that he turned bad. Because he was originally good, in fact.
Well, his maker made him and then was horrified by his appearance.
He didn't even give him a chance to teach him anything, to make him a good man. And instead, he was cast aside. Because after all, he just wants to be normal. Instead, he's just like, he wants to be accepted, and he doesn't want to be alone. But instead, Frankenstein rejects him, so therefore he's taken revenge on him, so that he feels the way he feels. Gets alienated among other men, I guess.
He's an imperfect god. Frankenstein is an imperfect god.
And he heartlessly slaughters all of his family, and he loses his soul because of that. Lots of soul imagery in Frankenstein, the book.
The book is
superior indeed, because it has a bunch of other things. It has the sailor guy, the captain, don't remember his name. But they just cut out everything, and they literally scoop out the innards and put something else in. It's not the same. So I recommend reading the book anyway, because it's great.
Are you saying that this is cinematically sewed together from chunks of the book and brought to life with modern technology?
I guess.
So this movie is kind of a Frankenstein's monster made from the book, but it was made from the play, which was made from the book. So it's probably a corpse of a corpse. But the thing is, though, we're not downplaying the movie. The movie is great, but I'm saying that the book has a lot more layers to it, like an onion.
Indeed. He is secretly
or an
Shrek.
ogre.
But no, in fact, Frankenstein reads 2 books, which is Paradise Lost and The Sorrows of Werther. I think it's actually German, sorry. The former is about Satan aspiring to be above God, the creation of God, Adam and Satan and stuff, and this ideology of whoever created Paradise Lost.
John Milton.
Oh, John Milton. And the latter, The Sorrows of Werther, is about a man who's alienated by society. So then he takes these 2 books to heart, and then he goes and philosophizes about them, which is the true creepy thing. And not the... So creepy.
You have to do it. You have to bring it from the back of your throat. Here, do it with me. That's not bad. That's not bad.
So anyway, Fritz sneaks in at the dead of night. Basically, he grabs the brain, and a gong just randomly goes off. There's literally nothing that why. It's literally just for plot convenience that the gong was there. I don't understand. So, and he gets scared by it, as well as the skeleton that bobs up and down, of course. He's always got to. And so then he grabs the criminal brain and leaves.
Fritz he's a sadistic and he's a Butterfingers. There's the two things that make...
Easily startled,
yeah, but he's a Butterfingers.
Yeah.
He's not a guy you want working on real experimentation, but he does a pretty good job of getting the machinery going. I don't know if this guy should really be trusted with heavy machinery with those Butterfingers of his.
So the next scene is where Henry's fiancée Elizabeth is, speaking with her friend Victor about the scientist. He sent her a letter about his love and stuff, and she's like, "What does this mean? This is really weird." And, the scientist is very eccentric and, secluded. And they discuss that. And meanwhile, her house is literally the hugest thing in the entire world.
It's beautiful.
It's enormous. It's
the
literally
sets
a
are
mansion.
Amazing.
And this only has 2 rooms. So a 2-room mansion, but it has the exact same size as how you describe it. Just a mansion made out of 2 rooms.
That's the thing, William, is you'll see with a lot of these Universal movies is the sets are amazing. I think as movies tried to spend less money on things like that, it really showed. I think probably as you get toward House of Dracula, House of Frankenstein, more to the end of the 40s, I think they spent less money on the sets. But here in the 30s and 40s, you get these big, expansive sets, and they're just famous. I mean, when you think of a lot of that, and honestly, guys like Tim Burton, were very... influenced by that, and you can see it especially in there's a movie called Edward Scissorhands that definitely has a lot of this. The main character is a creation of an old man, but he actually does care for his son, so he's
it's more like Pinocchio but dark.
Yeah, it kind of is a little bit, but there's Frankensteinian, if I can say that, elements in Edward Scissorhands, but the sets are very Universal Studios inspired. Wait, I would say Victor and Elizabeth, which is Henry Frankenstein's wife, they're talking, and there's a little part where, she says,
"Victor, you're a dear.
You know I'd go to the ends of the earth for you.
I shouldn't like that. I'm far too fond of you."
I wish you were.
Victor.
I'm sorry.
And I'm like, dude, you're kind of flirting with your best friend's fiance. That's kind of, I know you like her, and you might actually make a better husband, but bro, seriously.
And so then they go to Waldman because he's a personal friend, teacher, and stuff, I guess, with Henry. And basically he tells him, one day he changed, and now he wishes to create human life and not animal, because he wants to create life. Well, what's in harm in killing a couple animals?
The bodies of animals. Well, what are the lives of a few rabbits and dogs?
You do not quite get what I mean. Herr Frankenstein was interested only in human life. First to destroy it, then recreate it. There you have his mad dream.
No, it's human life. Well, not like that, that's just basically. This is Cliff Notes version. Please go watch this movie.
You get better quality if you buy the Blu-ray, though. I have a link to the Blu-ray in the post on our blog about this.
Yeah, because after all, you can watch it in 4K, I guess, if you want to.
It's got all of the Frankenstein movies. I mean, it's got Frankenstein, it's got Bride, it's got Son, it's got Ghost, it's got House of Frankenstein, all of those.
Abbott and Costello?
Abbott and Costello as well, in which we'll watch that one. I can't wait till we actually get to a movie that's meant to be funny. Because there are some of these movies that we would say, oh, they're unintentionally funny. They're not trying to be funny, but they are.
So, we have the crew, basically, and calling them the crew now. The crew is trying to stop his plan because he's creating life right now. So they go in a raging storm because, after all, you can't make a monster without raging storms and lightning.
The storm will be magnificent. All the electrical secrets of heaven. And this time we're ready. Hey, Fritz? Ready.
So then they come toward the tower.
The castle-looking tower, whatever it is right next to is it right next to the windmill? Or the windmill, I thought the windmill was further down towards the lake. Yeah, but it must be something that they own as the Frankenstein family. I mean, they've got money. But money doesn't interest Frankenstein. He's interested in...
So Frankenstein has tested his machine, and he's like, it'll be ready in 15 minutes, or it is ready, we'll just fire it in 15 minutes.
Oh, the Strickfaden, yeah. These are Strickfadens. Remember where they were named after the guy named Strickfaden who created all this stuff and rented it out to the movie company for about $10,000.
Yeah, they're very cool-looking machines.
They're iconic.
Very iconic.
They get copied, and any other movie that does this similar thing, they're just copying off of Frankenstein.
And so then they come in, they're like, please give us shelter from this really dumb storm that you have to be doing this in until it goes away. He lets them in anyway, regardless of not wanting him to go in the first place. And, he's like, I'm not crazy, I'll prove it to you.
You're crazy! Crazy, am I? We'll see whether I'm crazy or not.
And he makes him sit, basically. I mean, he looks like a normal man, but his stare is kind of otherworldly and Mad Men-y. But that's like the point, maybe, is that he's normal, kind of, because it's like anyone could be Frankenstein. The most normalist man.
He likes making people sit. Have you noticed that? I watched the movie once again in preparation for the podcast. He really likes making people sit.
Everyone's a dog to him.
He makes Waldman and Victor sit. He makes Elizabeth sit, but he says, sit, please. He's very nice. He commands the creature to sit as well. That's what I was saying. He just makes everybody sit. But anyway, continue.
And so he's proving himself that he's not a madman by lifting up the creature into the lightning, therefore making him alive again. And it's a famous scene when he brings him down and the fingers are moving and his stitched up body moves. Well, it doesn't rise, but it moves. And he's like, it's alive! It's alive! My own creation!
It's alive! Oh, it's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! In the name of God! Now I know what it feels like to be God!
And that's the famous quote, yeah.
Yeah. It's like a very important to his character thing that he's trying to become God, but ultimately falls short. Kind of like the Lucifer story, except not that he's like not Lucifer at all. And he said to Waldman before that, he thought ultraviolet light was the highest on the spectrum, Waldman, but then he found the cosmic rays that were used at the beginning of creation, and he used them to, he used them on animals, and then he kept a heart beating for 3 weeks and a half, I think.
Yeah.
And so then the monster's born, and the scene transitions to... So basically, Baron Frankenstein, or rather Frankenstein's dad, arrives to Elizabeth's house. And so they're talking about the dad's affairs, and he also says about the windmill and stuff. I don't know the specific line, but that's some foreshadowing for the windmill at the end of the movie. And then the Burgomaster enters.
Well, wait. The one quick comment about the Baron. I think that he is supposed to be one of the lone comic relief characters in this movie.
Except for the skeleton.
Except for Mr. Skeleton. Yeah, I forgot about him. He brings a lot of structure to this movie.
Skeletal structure.
Nothing? Okay.
Skeletal structure. There we go.
I thought I was going to do a bad joke. Or a dad joke as well. All right, so now the Baron, like I know a lot of these people are British, right? I get that. But, you know, a lot of what these characters, you know, they have an accent, a British accent, I get it. But the Baron is even throwing around a lot of British-isms, you know. He's like, oh, don't go of hell, what, and cheerio, pip, pip. You know, he's super British. I mean, he's laying it on thick. And his last name is Frankenstein. You know, he doesn't sound like he's, you know, German or Swiss or anything.
Yeah, because actually, he is not German, Frankenstein. He's actually Swiss. He lives in Geneva. But I guess that means that him being converted to living in Germany violates the Geneva Accords.
Oh, the Geneva Convention.
The Geneva Convention. Right. Indeed.
So what is a burgomeister?
So the burgomeister is basically the mayor.
Right, because a burg is a village and a meister is a master. So the village master. He's
the village
kind of a mayor. Yeah.
So then he's like, when are you going to put the date for the wedding of Frankenstein and Elizabeth, because they're engaged? Of course, that's what fiancé means. They're like, we're still don't really know and stuff. And Waldman is checked up upon the monster, who he says is dangerous to Henry, but Henry doesn't think so, even if he is a criminal brain.
Right. I think after all that creation, it's time for a cigarette. I think they're having some tea and some cigarettes, and they're sitting at the table talking about the ups and downs of what he decided to do, the goods and bads. Waldman is definitely a warner. He's warning him about, going too far. And he mentions that some things about his health and how if he goes too far with this, it could destroy him.
The brain that was stolen from my laboratory was a criminal brain.
Oh, well, after all, it's only a piece of dead tissue.
Only evil can come of it. Your health will be ruined if you persist in this madness.
I'm astonishingly sane, Doctor.
You have created a monster and it will destroy you.
So the monster, who is actually a very innocent oaf indeed, he's been kept in darkness for the entire duration of his one day upon creation, and he's just kept in darkness. And so then they bring him out, make him sit, of course, and he opens up the roof, Henry, and then the monster's reaching out toward the sunlight, but he can't reach it. That is very symbolic. Let me say something about Frankenstein, is that, he's not evil per se, but he's absent of good, which is something that the book has in there, is that evil is the absence of good. It's not like evil and good. It's just like when there is no good, there's evil. There's not like malevolent nature. It's just that he's not good. Then that's basically evil.
Yeah, and he needs to be taught. And honestly, I don't know about you, but I have dealt with some people in my life that are very nonverbal, and they are and very curious, that need to be taught things, who learned to speak over years, and we had to teach him some things. And he's very close to you and me. He's your brother. I'm not comparing him to a creature in a movie, but what I am saying is that I did find myself feeling sad and sorry for this creature because, as we'll see, he didn't ask to be created. He didn't ask to be born. He just is. And he didn't ask to be the way he is. He just is.
And therefore, why can't he be treated with normal rights?
Yeah, and respect. And be, and also I blame some things on, just the fact that everybody's surrounding him. There needs to just be Henry Frankenstein and the creature, and maybe Mr. Waldman. Everybody else can just go away. Fritz can go away too.
Because they're not important to the core of the story, but instead they just smolder that. But the book is, very interesting. Frankenstein, he's corrupting nature in his quest for glory, to be He-Man, I guess. master of the universe.
Yeah, to be a master of the universe, right.
Anyway.
He's reaching towards the...
Yeah, he's reaching for the sunlight, but he can't reach it.
And he's got his hands out like
he's like, why? Why can't I reach it? Why, Daddy?
Guess who comes in?
Fritz. With a torch. It's a big old torch. It's got fire. And he's like, ah! And so he hates it. And so he's trying to claw it out. And whoever is in his way trying to sustain him, he attacks. Upon which they're like, well, now he's attacking us. He's evil now.
But you notice that Fritz, he keeps on coming at him with the torch. I have this feeling about Fritz. Fritz is a smaller man.
Yeah, they put him in the dungeon. And then Fritz is like waving it at him and torturing him with this torch. Torture.
Terrible. That's a terrible pun. But Frankenstein's creature, he is chained up and he hates it. He's confused. People have done nothing to him but horrible things, and honestly, the only thing he knows is pain.
Quiet! Up there, you'll have the whole countryside on us. Come away, he has the strength of 10 men. Give me that.
And the thing about Fritz is, I think Fritz, instead of just doing the fire, going, oh, no, I'm sorry, and then going and putting it out, I think he liked the fact, subconsciously, that he, even as a small, twisted man...
And, he was a servant, he could become the master.
Yes!
And then he dies. The monster hangs him with a horrific scream.
The scene earlier where Frankenstein is saying, I know what it feels like to be God. That part was censored out of the 1931
as well as this part
version. Yeah, and this part here, there's a specific part where it shows Fritz coming very, very close to even the camera, sticking the torch at the camera, so you feel what the creature feels, and he's waving it in.
So it's right that he was killed, that the monster killed him. So they come in, they see him hanged.
He kind of deserved it.
He did deserve it.
It's definitely giving Dr. Frankenstein a headache. He stops Fritz from doing it, and Fritz, of course, grabs the torch, and he's like, oh, if I can't torture him with the whip, I'll torture him with the torch. Dr. Frankenstein thought he stopped him, but he kept going, and that's why he ended up.
And so the monster's like,
him.
Stay away, this guy's bad. He lunges at the two of them. And then they close the door on him. But then they're like, we have a sneaky, sneaky plan. We have a half-grade drug.
Come, pull yourselves together. What can we do? Kill it, as you would any savage animal. We must overpower him first. Get me a hypodermic needle. It's murder. It's our only chance. In a few minutes he'll be through that door. Come, quick, hurry.
That will put him to sleep. At this moment, I really liked that there was a detail where there was, clouds of dust that appeared. So they open the door again. The monster's like, wait, are they gone? And so he goes in, and then he's like, wait, Henry's here. And then he lunges at him.
But Henry's got a torch.
And then Waldman is injecting the drug, and he wrestles the two of them to the ground before falling unconscious. And he's like, wait, what happened? He's just like,
it's just that kind of moment where he's like, yeah, he almost turns into a little child for half a second.
He's always been a little child.
Yeah, but I still feel sorry for him. I know he does some horrible things in here, but it's like, if only you had treated him like a real person. And I think there is somebody in the next film that actually does treat him like a real person.
And teaches him to speak. But he doesn't speak as fluently as he learns to speak in the novel. In the novel, he runs away, and then there's his family, and he watches them speaking English, and he learns English from them, but he eventually reveals himself to them, and then they chase him out.
Is the man who owns the house, is he blind?
I don't remember.
The man is blind, but I think the family is not, so that when the creature comes in, he actually sits with the man, and the man actually talks to him and says, oh, you can't talk. That's okay. I'll make you some tea. And
he's talking to them, but just because of his appearance, they shun him. And he's been studying them and their English for a long time before Frankenstein encounters the monster. in the middle of the book.
Yeah, but as far as what happens in here, they have given him injection.
And they hide him. Henry's dad has come into the tower to arrange the wedding with Henry, but Henry is collapsed of exhaustion, and he's brought home, basically. And the monster is being observed by Waldman, who's been giving him more injections and stuff, keeping him at bay, and he notes this: increased resistance, necessitating stronger, more frequent injections, will now perform dissection. However, when he tries to do so, he gets strangled.
Oh, yeah, that's a really creepy scene, because, you see the hand come up, and it grabs him, and it's really creepy.
And once they've done the wedding, Henry is very happy with Elizabeth, and they're like, we're getting married, and stuff. They drink to the family health, the maids.
Well, first off, the monster escapes, and he leaves.
Oh, yeah, he escapes.
Henry and Elizabeth, they're kind of waiting on Henry to feel a little bit better after he collapsed, and they're talking about, when will we get married?
Henry, you're not to think of those things anymore. You promised.
All right. Let's think about us. When will our wedding be?
Let's make it soon.
As soon as you like.
They're definitely planning the wedding.
With Victor as best man and stuff. The whole village is celebrating, and they have had beer, and they're drunk, like, quite literally, the entire village.
They're getting free beer.
Thank you all very much indeed. I'm very pleased to see you all, and I hope there's plenty of beer. At all events, there's lots more where that came from.
And the entire village is partying it down, and it looks like Oktoberfest. Oktoberfest is like a German kind of holiday that it's kind of Americanized, and people drink all different kinds of beer, and they wear lederhosen and listen to polka music. So it just looked like Oktoberfest to me.
And so they show them being happy and jolly, and dare I say it, using the old meaning, gay.
Yes, absolutely. It fits this.
And then meanwhile, we have Maria and her dad, who's a farmer, and she has a cat as well. And she's extremely adorable and huggable, and I'm really sad for her soon fate to have. And Frankenstein's monster has come over, and she's like, hello, do you want to play a game with me? And so they throw flowers into the lake. It's so pretty. And he sees the flowers, he smells them, and then he goes, heh, which I thought was really funny. I'm like, why? You've seen flowers for the first time in your life, and all you do is go, heh.
Well, he doesn't know what to say.
Would you like one of my flowers? You have those, and I'll have these. I can make a boat. See how mine floats? No, you're hurting me! No!
Here's the key, is they're throwing pretty things. He thinks a pretty thing is a flower.
But he's run out of flowers.
So he has to throw another pretty thing in the water.
Yeah, he came to kick Frankenstein and chew flowers, and he's all out of flowers.
Oh no, that's terrible. So, but yeah, this is a very shocking scene. It did get cut short by censors.
And so then Maria drowns very quickly. In fact, so she just dies.
Why did she not?
In 2
Why
seconds.
did she not know how to swim? She's right next to a lake. She doesn't know how to swim. I don't know.
And she died really too quickly.
Well, I mean, they can't show the entire process. So they go back to the village.
And runs away. He's like, oh no, wait, did I do something bad? And then he runs. He's like, what have I done?
So back in the house, Elizabeth wants to talk to Henry alone.
She's in her bride's costume.
Yeah, aren't you not the costume? You're not supposed to see the bride before the wedding? That's like an old thing. Even the bridesmaids look at him kind of like, what's going on,
Very
guys?
bad luck.
And she has a premonition that something bad is going to happen and something's going to mess their lives up and separate them. And I made a mental note. Of course she does. She read the script.
Something is going to happen. I feel it. I can't get it out of my mind.
You're just nervous. All the excitement and preparation.
No, it isn't that. I felt it all day. Something is coming between us. I know it.
That's how she got the either that or she can't be psychic. But honestly, why wouldn't she think that her...
She's not a Legilimens from Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Am I right?
Right. Yeah, she doesn't have psychic powers yet. She's not a mutant. She just has a feeling, and I'm like, well, it's because she's lived with Henry, and he's got all these. He's weird.
Meanwhile, Victor's like, Waldman's dead, and then they're like, well, basically, and then Henry's like, it's the monster, of course, and so then the monster is there.
They start hearing him downstairs,
and then he comes up to Elizabeth, and Elizabeth does what all women do in every movie. Until we get to at least some sort of movie where, like, women actually do something about their situation and attack their enemies, but she screams. Always the same scream.
It is a complaint with a lot of these movies up until a certain point. Women were portrayed, they might have been portrayed as intelligent, they might have been portrayed as brave.
They might have been portrayed as Mrs. Percy Shelley.
Right, but then exactly. They aren't given their full name and kind of given an honor in that case. But there's the damsel in distress trope. You get a beautiful woman and some scary thing comes along, and then they're helpless, and they have to have some square-jawed man come save them. If you look at, and William, I will show you this later, but if you look at most, if not all, of the movie posters from now until I can't even say when, probably 70s, or sometimes mostly the 60s, but you'll have a woman who is menaced by a monster, and, it's just constant. So I think they're trying to go with, hey guys, you like monsters, don't you? You like pretty girls, don't you? Well, this monster goes after a pretty girl, right? Cool, huh? And then you get to imagine that you're the handsome guy with the square jaw who stops the monster. You would like that, wouldn't you? 10 cents, please.
So we're gonna sum this up, kind of, or not really. This one scene is the most striking scene in this whole film. Is when Maria's father has come and is carrying Maria down the entire lane while everyone is celebrating, and it's a harsh contrast to, we see the extremes celebrating, and the man, he's just walking, carrying his dead child all that way, and it was like, la 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 la.
Yeah, it still creeps me out to this day. I mean, the acting is just so, like, his...
Like, good job, Universal. Kudos to you. Kudos to Mary Shelley.
Also, the fact that they were willing to show this scene, it's one of those scenes that just kind of gets me, like, any father that has children should understand, what a horrible thing it is to lose a child. And so, and he sells it with this just destroyed look on his face.
And so he brings his daughter to the Burgermeister, and then she's like, she's dead, she's been drowned. And they're like, then we've got to go catch whoever killed Maria. And so then they do so.
Somehow he knows who it is or what it is, and they have to get together a plan. I think Victor comes and talks to Henry, and Henry's saying, I can't just let everybody else go do this.
I wonder. What do you mean? There can be no wedding while this horrible creation of mine is still alive. I made him with these hands, and with these hands I will destroy him. I must find him.
I'll go with you.
No. You stay here and look after Elizabeth. I leave her in your care, whatever happens. You understand? In your care.
I created him, I have to destroy him.
And so they trek out with torches. They're trekking down in the night. And there's like a scene where there's one dude, I think it's Henry, and he's going up another way. He's like, hey guys, over here. And so then they go on that track as well. And they're going through the countryside, which is a really great set. Is that spot. And they're journeying along.
The set looks really good, except for one thing that could have been a little bit better. I think whoever was in charge of ironing the sheet that was supposed to be the sky, They missed a couple spots.
Yeah, it's very wrinkled.
Yeah, it is. And in a lot of the hill area, you can tell that it kind of looks like a plaster or a styrofoam, and then they've covered it over with like dirt and trees to make it look really good. But otherwise, you can forgive that. And there's the way the sky is lit. It just and the way that anybody that gets in front of that sky gets really well lit in silhouette. It makes a very iconic imagery.
And so then the monster's found near the old mill, and Henry is facing off with him. There's a street fighter fight going on, and I guess Frankenstein does the Hadouken as usual, and he gets into a stun lock, and he's down.
The creature takes him to the windmill, to the top of it, and this is a very iconic scene, of course. And everybody's like, "Oh, there they are!" They get all their torches and they come down there.
The monster hurls Frankenstein down.
Frankenstein goes. The doctor, he goes really limp. It's almost like he's a fake person with stuffing in him. But he hits the I guess you call them blades. I don't know what those things are. The
windmill fans.
The fans on the windmill. He hits it and hits the ground, and he's hurt, but he's still breathing. He's got to recover. But the monster, some stuff falls on top of him, and you think that he is donezo. Of course, if you get the sequel, you're like, he's not.
Yeah, the windmill broke his fall and it saved his life, and they bring him home while the rest of the mob is setting the windmill ablaze with Frankenstein's monster in it, and that is the end of the movie. Well, except for this final part. At Castle Frankenstein, Henry's father is celebrating their wedding of his son and Elizabeth, and they toast to the future of their family.
As I said before, I say again, here's to a son, to the house of Frankenstein.
Yeah, and there, of course, I think we had discussed this before. There is a little bit of I don't think they knew they were doing this, but they said, a toast to a son, toast to the house of Frankenstein.
And toast to the ghost of Frankenstein. And toast to Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein. Toast to Igor, who is not canon. Anyway, speaking of not canon...
Most of this movie.
Yeah, in the book, in fact, the monster kills Elizabeth, and Victor Frankenstein is pursuing him to the Arctic Ocean out of revenge. And he's been pursuing him for a while, and he's still pursuing him after being told to go south by Captain Walton's crew. His name's Walton.
Yeah.
And so he dies shortly after he's told Walton his story. And he says that what you need to do is to have happiness and tranquility and avoid ambition. That's his lesson.
Yeah.
And the creature goes on the ship, and he's mourning over Victor's body. And he tells Walton that Victor's death had not brought him peace. Rather, his crimes had made him even more miserable than Victor ever was. And he says he vows to kill himself so that no one else will never be able to know of his existence. And he drifts away on an ice floe, never to be seen again.
Yeah, I've heard that. And I've seen a couple of predominantly faithful, descriptions of this. There is a movie, I think, that comes out in the late 90s called Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It's pretty faithful. It also makes it where Elizabeth is, of course, killed, but he is still begging the doctor to make him a bride. So they had to kind of do a nod to Bride of Frankenstein. And he brings his wife back to life, and she's as sewed up and everything. She looks rough. And they kind of, and even that doesn't work out. He does end up on an ice floe at the very end of the movie. There's a TV movie that I remember had Patrick Bergen and Randy Quaid in it. And that one was interesting, and I think I watched it. It was on TNT, and I watched the channel. I watched it a couple times when I was younger, and it was pretty faithful too. Except, the way that they created the monster was very, very strange, and it was almost like it was like a genetic cloning in a way. The doctor had to put his arm into this machine, and his genetic makeup was kind of used a little bit. So in a way, he is kind of his son. He's part of the doctor.
But we're not covering that one for now. our next episode will be The Mummy.
Yeah.
Which will be Indiana Jones before Indiana Jones, kind of.
Well, see, everybody was really obsessed with Egyptology and mummies and things like that.
This was another Universal production, I'm pretty sure.
Yes, and I will say that Egyptology and that, really inspired a lot of different, movies and TV, little shorts and serials at that time. But that's what was on people's mind. It was very pulpy. It was that kind of that pulp thing that was coming out in the 1930s, where you had
and surely an inspiration for Lucas.
Oh, of course, yes. The thing about it is, this movie has Boris Karloff again. He does not. Yeah, he does have some makeup on,
and it also has the famous Scorpion King played by Dwayne Johnson. Oh, right. Sorry, that's
no.
That's not it.
No, absolutely not.
Not yet.
Not yet. So anyway,
we're covering the bad Mummy. It's probably not for a while, definitely, if ever.
Yeah, we can finally put this film to rest. I'm sure that Frankenstein's creature is no more. I'm sure we'll never see him again. Oh, right. So in about 4 years, they finish up the movie. They have the next movie, which is Bride of Frankenstein, which we'll cover in a couple.
I'll be excited for that.
I actually think it's, in some ways, I find it superior to this one. So I'll have to let you watch that one and see if you agree or not.
Yeah. So this is Jason and William and Jason signing off.
Signing off. It's not alive anymore. It's not alive.
It's not our own creation.
Yes. Just like Dr. Frankenstein, this podcast episode is our creation, and we have to let it go and go find its own way in the world. And hopefully you'll be kind to it and not cause it violence.
So, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Don't forget to open your third eye and telepathically message us at cinefanpod@gmail.com. Set your chronoscope dial to the future setting and peruse cinematicfanpodcast.wordpress.com. Hunker over your ham radio as your keen ears listen for the ghostly voices tweeting on our Twitter @CinematicFanta1. Exchange all of your money into Republic credits and donate at our Patreon page at patreon.com/cinefanpodcast. Ending transmission now.